Guys, this is eVTOL fan club. My name's Liam. I am one of the Hustle Brothers here. I've got my two other brothers with me. I've got Reece and I've got Mark Berry. Guys, happy 4th of July for the last day. I actually forgot to say that at the last stream. Happy 4th of July. Bit of a wild week. We've got the big, beautiful bill that has been passed. It's quite good for the eVTOLs. We can talk about that. But Reece, how are you getting on today?
Yeah, doing all right. It's been mixed weather over here at the moment. But yeah, I think stock-wise, we're sort of just treading water, finding out which way we're going to go next. Yeah, how about you, Mark? How's it going over there? The other side of the pond.
Doing well. Was a fun week. Obviously, a lot happening in the financial markets last week. And I'm curious to see how, obviously the market closed at 1 o'clock on Thursday. So I'm curious to see how the bill will impact the opening tomorrow morning. For all intents and purposes, I'm pretty positive about long-term future. I think there could be a little bit of volatility, but obviously Musk came out and made his statement. This isn't necessarily tied to eVTOL, but the implications of what his initiatives and statements he's been making, I think is going to it's going to add some volatility to Tesla stock and to also SpaceX and which could give rise to Rocket Lab.
And that's the thing. It feels like this beautiful bill, it is giving rise to, as they say, eVTOL dominance. But speaking about the likes of Tesla and the electric vehicle market, if Tesla falls back, it's going to pull the whole market back. It only takes the whole macro market to pull back, and you will see the eVTOLs pull back quite significantly. I will dive into some of the figures over the last week. Guys, do let me know as well. I'm thinking of rolling out 4 separate videos this week. I want to do a financial analysis on Joby HOVR, Vertical Aerospace, and Horizon Aircraft. Do let me know which one you want to see first. But we'll jump straight across to the last week here. So, Joby, on Friday, we did close at 1 o'clock. We did finish 3.84% up. We were quite flat after hours. After hours did finish at, 5 o'clock. Then, over the last 5 days, up 11.29% over the last month. That's 31.38%, still climbing. Over the 6 months, we're 7.98%. And then over the last year, we have that beautiful 104%. Going across to Archer. Archer up 1.09%. Archer have quite a bit of news we're going to cover today. Over the 5 days, though, we are down 3.97% over the last month. We are climbing. Slow and steady, 4.63. Love to see it. Over the last 6 months, we are down that 11%. And then over the last year, again, the eVTOL market did have that boom, and we are up 141%. Vertical Aerospace. Vertical had a nice Thursday, up 6.13%. And then, look, we're quite flat after hours, 0.42%. Over the past 5 days, that's 13.87% up. And guys, remember, in the S&P, you can only expect, you'd be expecting 8 to 9% per year. We have seen over the past, decade, it has been 10 to 12, but yeah, 8 to 9% is quite a safe bet. Over the last month, it's 40% up, and then over the past 6 months, we're down 38.12%. Given the year, we're down minus 7.83%. And then everyone's new favorite, I did drop a recap video of that interview with Brandon. We will be interviewing Brandon. We'll be bringing Mark with us. Bringing Mark with us will be very insightful. For any of you guys, you probably do know Mark here, but if you don't, he is a private pilot and he is an aerospace engineer. But over Thursday, we were down 3.65%. We are pulling back a little bit from where we were. Over the past 5 days, though, we did see a rise of 4.64%, but over the last month, it's 73% up. Am I looking at entering? look, we will talk about that. Over the past 6 months, we are up 37%. We were in that NASDAQ compliance zone. We were getting a little bit worried around the time of interview, but we did rally up. Over the past year, we are up 200%. And guys, 200%, 20x. Oh, no, it's not a 20x, it's a 2x.
Right, yeah.
Guys,
It probably does have the potential, don't you think? Like in terms of if they did get their order book sorted out and started, it's back to what we were discussing last week, really. I think in terms of it just depends on how much it will cost them to do the design and how much funding they can get in before that, just to make sure that they are compliant and that they do get over the line. But at the moment, with market value, I think there's a big scope, obviously, for multiple X if it isn't 20.
Mark, you are quite a big investor in Horizon. Have you entered since? Are you still adding? Are you happy holding your position?
Yeah, so as I said last week, I did exit out of my position in Horizon after they announced their dilution or their tender offer for shares. Purely not because, I mean, that's just purely a short-term move. I fully intend to get back to HOVR. I made a really good gain in HOVR. I basically, made 100%, took the profits off the table, and now I'm waiting for it to settle back down. But I mean, my thesis on the entire eVTOL space of what I like from an aircraft package and use case of capabilities or capabilities of the different use cases that are out there, I think HOVR has the best package together. And I think that I'm confident I'm going to be getting back into HOVR here pretty shortly. I'll tell you when I do, I'll let you guys know. I'll put my cards on the table and or my chips on the table and it's not like it's any secret or anything to that effect. As of right now, I'm basically in Joby at this point, and have a pretty significant amount of shares of Joby at this point, and could potentially offload them for a profit if I wanted to, but I'm kind of at the point where I don't want to now. I think you're going to start seeing. It's a risk. The volatility risk there is I think if Joby announces a schedule slip, you're going to see the stock price get impacted. If they come with good news, like they keep bringing out more and more good news of progress, but that doesn't say, hey, here's the shiny object here, but the true end date and profitability is out here, and they're not saying how far out there is. None of them are saying that at this point. So it's, but long term, I'm long on all of them.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm going to be dead honest with the guys. I more or less have a 50-50 split between Joby and ACHR. I'm still uncomfortable adding to either at this price. It's not the fact that I'm bearish on them at this level. I do see a bit of a pullback coming, and you are going to call me bearish for that. Like all I can see catalyst-wise coming up is Joby progressing forward. I do feel like it will pull ACHR up in tandem, but look, for me, there's just too much risk to be adding. I do see opportunities elsewhere. Like I am adding a lot more Redwire lately. I know it's not directly eVTOL, but they do have that VTOL aspect and the defensive side. Reece, where are you sitting in eVTOL?
Yeah, very similar to you. I think at the moment, I think the risk to reward at this stage is difficult to add because we are at or near all-time highs at the moment, and the fact that we need significant news, really, I think, to absolutely smash them all-time highs, and that would be the type certification. And by the news that's been coming out lately, I can't see that happening for the next, well, probably, let's say 9 months, really, at this point, at the very minimum. And that's assuming that everything goes swimmingly. so if it does, like at the moment, I'm looking, if it goes under that, maybe $8, $9, I think that's maybe a bit of a more healthy place to be adding in, because I can see the scope for it to like double. But at the moment, it's up, and when it's up in the tens, it's a bit of a, like, I feel like you're in a little bit in limbo in terms of which way you could, like, it can go next.
Mhm.
And then you buy in, and the next thing you know, it's gone back down to 8, and then you're sitting there going, "Oh, I wish I'd have waited and just caught it on the down wave." But then obviously, same breath, it could go up. I guess we'll see now in this next week. I think it's going to be an interesting week for all of the tech space, really.
And then, guys, just to reiterate as well, this is not financial advice at all. Never follow the hustle brothers when it comes to any sort of trading move. I had a really funny comment. I forget who it was that said, "Look, we seem to know what we're talking about, but our entry and exit positions are always well off." So, guys, if that is anything to go by, do not follow our trades. But I want to jump straight into Joby, because I was getting a bit of feedback that we have been neglecting Joby an awful lot recently, and we have been pushing more Archer. So I want to start with Joby. So Joby did post that they have had 40,000 plus miles flown, hundreds of takeoff and landings, flights across 4 countries, with Dubai as the latest addition. And Dubai gave gift of heat, where their aircraft flew in temperatures nearing 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Needless to say, their pilots were grateful for the in-cabin AC. Now, me and Reece did talk at the very start. It was probably on eVTOL Weekly episode 1 or episode 2 that would these crafts struggle in extreme temperatures. We were more worried about the cold weather, but we did say they would need to test them in the warm weather. Now that we've got a pilot on board, an aerospace engineer, I want to throw it to you, Mark. I'm going to put you under pressure here and say, in terms of designing an aircraft, how hard is it to adapt it for hot weather conditions?
So, as a pilot and also as an engineer, cold weather is always far better for performance than hot weather.
Yeah.
Yes, far, far better. Now, there's a caveat to that. In an eVTOL, you have batteries. So you don't want your batteries frozen, because they will not have their efficiency. But from an aerodynamic performance perspective, cold weather is always much, much better than warm weather. A propeller is all a propeller is a wing in itself. If you were to look at the cross section of a propeller, it's going to be an airfoil, just like a wing, with twist and different angles of attack as it goes down from the root out to the end of the propeller. But that thing spinning through the air is doing the exact same thing as a wing flying through the air. It's just doing it in a rotational sense, but it's creating a high and low pressure, which is what's giving you your force, and that's what's causing it to lift. And when you get at higher altitudes or higher temperatures, the air is not as dense, so that airfoil does not produce as much lift, because there's just not enough air molecules to interact with the actual propeller. And it's the same thing with engines as well. Like a jet engine does not produce the same thrust up at altitude, but the caveat to that is when you're at a higher altitude, your drag is a lot less as well. So you want to fly aircraft high, but taking off and landing, which is what these eVTOLs are constantly going to be doing, at high altitudes and at high temperatures, which the temperature increases the density altitude. We've got in aviation, you have a thing called a standard day, and that would be everything is based off at sea level at 15 degrees centigrade, and I think I should know it. I'm almost positive it's 15 degrees centigrade, but that's like the standard that you do all of your performance specifications to that particular standard. And then you have degradation as you either get higher in altitude, because the air is less dense, than it is at sea level. So, and it's the same thing with temperature. As you start climbing, and if you start raising the temperature, then for all intents and purposes, the airplane actually thinks it's at 4,000 feet as opposed to sea level. Like you could have a really, really hot, humid day in Savannah and or down on the coast in Florida. Like it'd be 110 degree or 105 degrees and really, really high humidity. And that's going to cause the air to be just a lot less dense. And then that's going to, the airplane will then think, oh, I'm at 4,000 feet or I'm at 5,000 feet. And when you're flying, actually, that's information that's very pertinent. If you're flying on a really hot day, when you fly into an airport, they tell you what the density altitude is because you want to prepare for that when you're coming into land. Otherwise, because the airplane will have different performance characteristics at higher altitudes. So to sum that up, the fact that they're demonstrating at 110 degrees, and not only is it 110 degrees, it may be 110 degrees, 15 feet up where they're making their measurement. If they're on a tarmac that's got blacktop and all the heat is radiating in that local area, it could be 120 to 130 to 140 degrees. It could be extremely hot. So demonstrating the fact that Joby demonstrated that they could take off vertically and they did convert, right? They converted and came back and landed.
I am pretty sure they did. I'll have to jump into that. I know it was piloted, but did they convert?
Yeah. That's a very important performance characteristic to say, look, and we're going to start seeing this between these two competitors, between Joby and Archer. Like Archer, I think, also took their airplane over and they just lifted off, hovered, and then came back down again. Like if they do it at 9 o'clock in the morning and they do it at 3 in the afternoon, it's a huge difference. It could be it could be an enormous difference. So
I just want to jump in there and say it was a full transition they achieved.
Yeah. So, and not only that trend, that hover transition, but then also, or that hover profile of the flight, and then converting. Also, the wing will not produce as much lift in a higher temperature environment. So the only way you counteract that is you have a higher angle of attack, or you have to go fast.
And does that put more stress on, say, the engine or the battery?
It would just require more power. They would have to. You're just going to supplement that with the power and what the rotors are going to have to do. So yeah, it will be. And again, everything in aerospace is margin. You never take off at 100% margin, or right at 100%, and you don't take the airframe to 100%. You test it to it, but you never take it to it, because that's where you start getting into things called factor of safety, and you don't want to break the airplane. You don't want to overstress a motor. It can do it, and in an emergency situation, you will do it. So right now, when Joby's doing their testing right on the coast, cooler temperatures because they're right on the ocean. They may, hopefully, it's only requiring maybe 70% of their motor capability, I'll just throw that out there. Let's say it's 70% of their motor capability to hover. If you go to a higher altitude and a higher temperature, or just a higher temperature, you'll see it may require 80 to 85%, or it's going to be a higher amount of power. But I suspect Joby has already tested all of this out because they're testing at Edwards Air Force Base. And Edwards Air Force Base is the high desert of California. It's something like 4,000 feet or something. I'll look and see what Edwards elevation is. But that to go back to aviation history, and sorry, I'm going to nerd out for a second, but if you go back 20 years when Lockheed Martin and Boeing were competing for the Joint Strike Fighter program, and the Joint Strike Fighter, one of their aircraft had to take off vertically and then convert, similar to what these aircraft do now. but in a completely different powertrain. It's all based off turbines and whatnot. But Lockheed demonstrated theirs in the high desert of California on a hot day, and Boeing went all the way to Patuxent River, Maryland, right, which is right at sea level. And you could see in that because we were aerospace engineers were following this competition very, very closely, because it was to win that contract, and it was billions of dollars were on the line. So in that time, like when Lockheed did their hover and then converted and flew, they did it in Palmdale, California, as where Boeing went and they took parts of the aircraft off. Even like they were removing doors and like getting as much weight off the airplane as possible, just so that they could do their hover test, or those were observations at least at the time. So
Boeing have been doing that for a while then.
I'm sorry?
Boeing have been doing that for a while. I think there was a big scandal coming out.
Yeah, I mean, in the world of aerospace, the military has had a hovering aircraft for a long time. The Harrier, obviously, which was designed by the English. So, shout out to you, Reece. The Harrier was originally designed in the 1960s, and all that is it's just a big jet engine, but they're diverting the thrust in these channels these louvers that could move on the side of the airplane. I won't get into the mud of the pros and cons of that design challenge, but the the Harrier was a very successful military platform for many, many years. And eventually Boeing bought the rights to it and modified it. And the U.S. Marine Corps has used it. It's pretty much a very integral part of the United States Marine Corps' aviation platform. So when the Joint Strike Fighter came along, that program came along, Boeing adopted a very, very similar propulsion system as where Lockheed had a completely different propulsion system. They had a standard jet engine that would articulate in the back and point the thrust in the back of the airplane, and then it has a lift fan in the forward section with a big shaft that goes to that lift fan, and these doors open up, and it creates and from an aerospace perspective, there was a lot of advantages to Lockheed's design, and so we knew there was a lot of there wasn't much surprise when Lockheed did win that contract. But to that point, and I'm sorry that I've probably taken 20 minutes to just.
No, you're fine. I'm interested.
Where I could have just said, yes, temperature matters.
That's what we did.
Temperature certainly matters. Yeah.
And then jumping across, I think this sort of backs up your point there. So we had a nice post put out by Let's Talk Joby. Guys, if you haven't followed Travis, make sure to jump in and follow him. But the critical backbone to Joby's development and flight testing campaign has been their work with the Department of Defense over 8 years. They have 2 aircraft based at Edwards Air Force Base, hundreds of flights, including piloted through VTOL wing-borne transition flight, high temperature and environmental dust testing within, I'm not even gonna, Mojave Desert?
The Mojave
Desert. And then successful exercises and testing of intentional failure mode injections, including motor, actuators, and batteries. Does this show that defensive and military applications always give rise to the best types of technology? Does it show that getting involved with the likes of the Department of Defense always has its advantages over trying to stay clear of them contracts? Mark, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if Joby started 15 years ago with the intention of, well, we want to get DoD contracts, but with just the use cases of an eVTOL and what it brings, naturally the government and the Department of Defense is going to want to use that technology. So it it's kind of the chicken or the egg, but yeah, if you go out into the middle of the woods and invent the anti-gravity device, the government is going to build a road to your house. It's it's going to happen.
I actually love that analogy. Do you know why? Because I've been watching Joe Rogan lately, yeah. And who is it? Bob Lazar. Mate, I just went down a rabbit hole with that lately. And anti-gravity. Nah, love it.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Dylan. Dylan is having a bit of chill out time away with his family at the moment. He'll be back with us very soon. But Dylan, relax up, have a great time. And he says, great to get a chance to catch this on a Sunday. Thank you very much, mate. How are you feeling about Archer at the moment? We did have a little bit of a pullback. I will show up what I was going to bring up. Have I closed down the article? No, here we go. So they did fall hard initially because, let me get his name right here. Eric Lentil sold more than 95,000 shares of Archer at a price of $860, and that was a total of 1.01 million. Do you know what? I've got quite interested in investor sentiment and the insiders. I looked at, was it Joby last day or was it Archer? I think it was Joby, and it was quite a nice buy of 364 million or something. Guys, do let me know who that was. I never actually checked it out. But I think looking at some of the insider trade, well, not insider trading, the insider transactions, it can give you a sentiment of how the company is feeling. This does signify, look, I don't think Archer's going to put much higher than even $13, even if we will touch that again at the moment. I do expect a little bit of a pullback. But guys, have you any thoughts on that, Archer? Like, what are we sitting at the moment?
I do find it quite funny that I think we discussed this last week, didn't we? In terms of insiders and who's keeping and who's selling. And I think
we're going to bounce around that channel.
Yeah, agreed. I don't mind people trimming off and selling a bit here and there. Quite a large amount of shares to be selling. Obviously, we don't want to be seeing anyone sell. You'd like to think that they can all be back in behind this and expecting it to go much higher. But I think it's definitely something we need to keep maybe a bit more of an eye on, because if we do start seeing a few more, then maybe the next few months might not be the prettiest, and maybe it's a time to lean back towards Joby again. I feel like every 3 months we go one side to the other. It's like one of those pendulums, just swinging.
Mark, does it sort of back up your thesis with back in Joby at the moment that Archer, until they... I don't want to get the Archer guys on my back here. I need to be very careful.
There's no winning, is there? Like 1 week you get...
there's no winning.
Archer.
Until they can not perform, I'm not saying perform, but to the levels of Joby in relation to transition flights, in relation to even your testing in the hot weather, do you think it's just safer to stick with Joby at the moment?
Well, this is not investment advice, but at the micro level, or in the next 6 months, I think that probably Joby is probably a better stock to trade. I think Joby's they're hitting their performance, or they're showing more milestones towards at least their capabilities. What I want to see from any of these companies is their schedule, because their schedule is going to tell everything. If they come out and they say that, we're not even going to enter TIA testing for another 6 months, then they're a year and a half to 2 years out. Or if it's a really accelerated schedule with the FAA, maybe a year. But I want to hear them say I want to hear either one of them say, we've entered TIA testing, because that means they're using the FAA for credit to start ticking off their different milestones towards type certification. Am I still on?
Yep.
All right.
It was me that
Yeah,
lost
no,
it.
All right. So go ahead.
Oh no, it was the only reason that I could see them avoiding saying anything like that. For example, if they came out now and they said it's going to be a year and a half, I could see a lot of people selling shares. The day traders.
Yeah.
So even
It would
though
be a
I would love
short
to know the
paradise.
information, I would absolutely love to. But I'd be scared of the people that are only in for a minute or two would sell out and they'd say, "I'll come back in a year and a half," or "I'll come back in a year."
And this is just it too. Like, they could be, both of them could have DoD, could potentially start saying, well, we've got DoD contracts coming online, or we are expecting a DoD contract in 6 months. And both of them could have that. So they could say, so we're delaying type certification until 2 years out. And that lengthens their runway out, but then they just supplemented it with, oh yeah, our balance sheet actually got cleared up because we are now, getting funding from the DoD, or there are programs of records that are coming online that either of them are going to support. That is a possibility. Now, we're talking in the next 6 months to a year and a half, and of course, like right now today, people want to say, should I buy into this company, either one of these companies or any of these companies? Should I buy into this space? If you look out 5 years or 10 years, they're saying in 5 to 10 years, this is going to be a $1 trillion industry. So it's going to be a $1 trillion industry. And that is the truth. And you have that investment, and you have that long-term investment horizon. It wouldn't make a difference if you bought it at 10 or if you bought it at 5 at this point. Because both of these companies are.
Have we lost Mark there?
Seems like there's something happening in this room, isn't it?
Do you know what? I got kicked off for the first time. I don't know how long, Reece, how are you getting on, brother? It's been a long time.
Sorry, did I lose you guys?
Yeah, we
No,
literally
you're all
just
good. Back here now.
mid-sentence there.
Yeah, I need to not do this on my phone, because anytime somebody calls me, it cuts out, right? I need to change this. So I apologize about that. Where did you guys lose me at?
You were saying about
$1 trillion industry.
$1 trillion industry. It doesn't matter if you buy in at 5, you buy in at 10.
Yeah. So because any of these companies that when Archer and Joby get type certification, the public will only have access to these vehicles, not through the government, but through what is a type certified charter aircraft. And if that's $1 trillion industry, then just look at they're going to be the only ones to pick from the tree of opportunity until other companies come along and do type certification as well. So you look at Beta. Beta has now come out and said, they want to develop just a CTOL variant where it's just a standard airplane taking off and landing. And that might be some telltale signs of, their technology isn't far along enough to where they feel confident for what Joby and Archer are doing, which just codifies Joby and Archer are further along. So their play is, we're going to go ahead and just get an electric CTOL certified. And they spoke about that. And then once that's certified and generating revenue, then they'll transition to a full EVTOL. So and this is just it. And in full disclosure, I'm I'm an investor in the space, but I'm a trader in the stocks
Yeah.
in the individual companies, and I'm going to continue to do that. It's why I elect to not, go work for any of them, so I can invest in all of them.
Do you know what? You can come work with us.
Yeah.
We'll build our own.
They wouldn't have me anyway. I'm not that good an engineer. So.
I've been quite excited to share this one with you, and I apologize for Archer Daily. I didn't cover this when you sent it to me, but I wanted to wait until I got on with Mark here. So this is in relation to Archer again. So Archer is now planning to certify Midnight with 4-bladed lift propellers instead of the original 2-bladed propeller currently installed on the manned conventional takeoff and landing prototype aircraft. This is going to be a very stupid question, Mark, but what is the real difference between having the 4 propellers for the vertical takeoff?
Yeah, so a 4-bladed propeller is going to give you more lift capability as long as the motor can provide the torque for it. A more efficient propeller, the most efficient propeller in the world is actually a single blade that like spins around a point, but you just don't have that. Like my airplane has, is one propeller, so and it's symmetric around its axis of rotation. So a 2-bladed propeller.
Yeah.
That's an efficiency case. That's where you're going to get your most bang for the power. But electric motors can kick out an enormous amount of power, an enormous amount of torque. And torque is what torque and velocity of how fast it's spinning is the definition of power. So if you can add, as you start adding rotors, and you can still maintain that amount of, or you can increase the torque, you can then get a lot more thrust. So it's not as efficient, but the name of the game is they're trying to meet their key performance parameters to what they advertised, and that now means they may not be able to do it with just 2 propellers on the aft booms. They're going to need 4 propellers. You look at Joby. Joby has what, 6 propellers on theirs, or I've never counted them, but it's got a lot of propellers. And that equates to their motor can produce an enormous amount of torque and give it a lot of power, which just equates to a force vector or the amount of thrust each one of those can put out. So,
sorry to jump in there. Just in terms of the design process, if they're moving back from 2 to 4, is that going to delay them again in terms of, because that was the original scheme and they were changed and now they're back?
It probably won't delay them. What it's going to do is, because swapping out propellers is just you bolt it on and you bolt, it's probably a common hub.
Would you not have to go and test it then after that point? Is it?
You will, but they're in testing right now, so they're just transitioning to just most likely, what it's going to affect is they're getting more power out of those, more thrust out of going with a 4-bladed propeller or a 4-rotor system. Yeah. But that's going to be more energy draw on your batteries, which is then going to equate to your distance is going to be affected. But as battery technology improves, then they may have already solved that problem. They may say, well, we can go for 20 minutes. We can't do it today, but in 6 months we're going to have a more efficient battery and we'll be able to do 25 minutes. So, but 4 rotors in the rear, as I said when I originally came on here, flying through the air and those rotors just out in the wind, unless they can go, like this to like this, and I think there is to where all of them are pointing into the wind and then potentially rotate back out again into a 4-blade. It's kind of a challenging mechanism, but it can be done. Then with 2 of those propellers just sticking out in the wind, it's going to cause more. It's what we call frontal area, and that just equates to more drag when you're in conventional flight.
And then I got to sort of phrase this question right. So I understand you are not flying commercially, are you? Or it's not really up to me to say whether you are or you're not. But as a commercial pilot, would you? So I presume you have to have a certain amount of reserve fuel when you have passengers on board.
Yes.
Is that equated by the amount of distance you'll be able to travel once you hit your reserve fuel, or is there a certain amount of reserve fuel you have to have on board? And if so,
go ahead.
How much of a battery life will they have to have left going forward? I know that's a bit of a bollocks of a question.
It's a great question, because you can equate the amount of fuel to the amount of battery life. There is a 1-for-1. The way the FAA defines that is that it's not in how much fuel you have, it's how much time you can stay flying until you run out of fuel. So the regulations state you need to have, if you're in visual flight, if you're in an instrument flight, if you're on an instrument flight plan, you need to be able to go to your destination and then be able to divert to your alternate destination, and then still have 45 minutes of time. So now this is for a gas engine airplane. For a helicopter, I don't even know if I don't know the rules because I'm not a helicopter pilot, but it's much different for a helicopter, because for a helicopter you just go to a hover and slowly come down. But there will be, yes, these aircraft are going to have to demonstrate, and there will be regulations that say you have to demonstrate flying for a certain period of time, and then you need to just, you have at a certain point when you reach your destination, or what will determine their range will be, you can go so far, and then when you get to that point, you still have to have 20% of your battery life, or whatever's going to equate to, you have to be able to sit there for 5 minutes maybe, or someone had said they have to demonstrate they have to hover for 20 minutes, but that would then be, that's the entire length of the flight. And again, as Brandon said, these aircraft, when they're flying through the air, are far more efficient. The power required when you're just flying the big wing through the air, the wing is giving you all the lift, so it's a minimal amount of power, battery power, battery usage, or in a standard airplane, fuel. If you are in there's a reason why they say helicopters, they don't fly, they just beat the air into submission, because it's exactly what a helicopter does. Is it just those rotors are spinning, and it's very inefficient. It's an efficient way to fly. The most efficient way is a glider. A glider can use thermals and stay up all day long. So being wingborne flight is far more efficient, but they're still going to have to demonstrate when you get to your location, you have to come in and land, and you may have to sit there for 5 minutes waiting for someone else to move out of the way. Maybe another Archer came in and landed, and now that landing zone is fouled, and they've got to move it out of the way until you can come in. So there will be a lot of rules and regulations about just what you can do.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Guys, you can see the amount of details that Mark brings to these streams. This is not just about us, though, learning about it. You guys can hop into the comments here if you want to ask any question.
The whole point of this.
Ask away, honestly. Mark seems to be a fan favorite, because once again, we're smashing our live stream numbers. So, Mark, I want to thank you so much for that. But I have another bit of news, guys. So we don't cover them as much, but they're in the eVTOL space, so we better give them a shout out. Vertical Aerospace does expand their leadership team with key executive appointments. Mark Higgins joins as Chief Operations Officer. Steve Velicott joins as Vice President Airworthiness and Head of Design Organization, and Eric Sampson named Vice President of Program Hybrid. Mark, how bullish are you on Vertical at the moment? Like, they are seeming to have a nice month. They're starting to rally up 40%, but if we look over the last year, they are 38%, or over 6 months, they're 38% down. Then over the last year, they never got that big rise that we've seen with Archer and Joby. And even you can say Harvard are down 7%. Do you follow Vertical much, or do you more or less stick with the big guns?
Yeah, so I don't. Not right. Well, at least right now I'm not. But I need to start. I would love to like have a top 10, because I think that in this space you probably have a good 5 to 6 that are all competitors, but then you've got 10 or 12 companies that have different use cases. So I would like to start, putting a list of all these different companies together. But to that point, you know, in the aerospace industry, there are not a lot. I mean, it's a fairly good size industry, and it's a growing industry. You see a lot of young people going into aerospace, which is fantastic. You know, and I credit, I really kind of credit Musk and SpaceX and just all of the just how much he's really kind of, you know, brought to the forefront of just how cool it can be to be an aerospace engineer or a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer or software engineer. I just don't want to say aerospace engineer. And, you know, truth be told, my degree is in mechanical engineering. It's not in aerospace engineering. So all true aerospace engineers will roast me for, well, you're not a real engineer. You're not an aerospace engineer. But, you know, within this industry, it's important to see. It's almost like coaches. Which coaches are getting hired on by different football teams or football clubs? Because that matters. Who your executive leadership is, and like you pull some. And I don't want to rip on, you know, kids directly coming out of college, because there's some unbelievably brilliant talent coming out of our universities now all over the world. And going into the aerospace industry, and a lot of them are, you know, like you look at some of the chief engineers now of some of these programs, and they're in their early 30s, and it's very similar to what you saw in the Apollo days too, way back when there was this huge influx of aerospace engineers for the moon race. But seasoned veterans that have done certification programs and taken a program from, you know, inception all the way through to type certification and entry into service, those are actually pretty few and far between. Or that's a very tight group of very, very sought after individuals. So, and some of them are, you know, they stay put at the larger companies like Boeing or Airbus or Bombardier or Gulfstream, and you know, and so who these like chief technical officer is, who the chief engineer is of Joby. I mean, obviously Joe Bin is the visionary, and I believe he is an engineer, but it's not like he's, you know, there's an army of individuals, you know, a very, very large team within each one of these organizations. But who makes up that team? You would be very surprised how that can really define success and not define success. So,
guys, Mark also had an idea about us creating a roadmap where each of these eVTOL companies are in relation to certification, in relation to commercialization, just their journey across it. We will be rolling that out. But another one he sort of threw at us was we could have like even if it was a spider diagram, and we sort of looked at the organizational structure of, say, Joby, Archer, or so. And then we can dive into the likes of their chief engineer. We can see their background. We can see what they have achieved. And it'd be a nice way to compare the companies. It'd be something that I don't think I have seen done before in this space. And it would be something I would really love to have Mark on board doing. Guys, if it's something you want to see, definitely jump into the comments. We have a quiet group today. We have a big group, but we have a quiet group.
I think what will be quite interesting to see will be whose team are probably more experienced or who's got a better team. Because like from the outside perspective, I already think I know whose team is better. The one that's vertically integrated and a lot further ahead. But it'd be interesting to see now, is there any changes or is there a way of them maybe closing that gap? Who has a bigger team? We don't even know that. Like, until we delve into it, there's quite a few questions that couldn't get answered. And looking forward, we'll need to know who is in that team if they are going to be successful going forward and like closing that gap.
It'd be a bit like fantasy football, innit? But you know what? Yeah, when we see big names get announced, at least we'll sort of know who they are. Rather than me just reading it out. Like, guys, jump in and please tell me, do you know who Mark Higgins is, Steve Velikat, or Eric Sampson was before I announced them today? Did you know, guys?
No.
Never heard them before. Yeah. Guys, this is EVTOL Fan Club. We're doing this every single Sunday. Make sure to bang that like button if you want to see more of this. Again, guys, if you enjoy having Mark on the team, he is a complete fan favorite. Please jump into the comments and let us know if you want him to start creating his own videos. And you know what? I'm not even going to give a choice. He is going to be creating his own videos because he is unbelievable.
I need to stop flying around the Southeast and focus more on actually making content for our fans.
Do you know what? People were beating me up while I was taking a few days off on the channel because I think I was rinsing and repeating a clip I had of you speaking, and I just had like 4 videos with different thumbnails, and it was the same video over and over. So guys, I do apologize about what was away. But guys, my name is Liam. I am one of the Hustle Brothers here. This is EVTOL Fan Club. Make sure to join us on, are we going to say Tuesday again, guys?
Yeah, Tuesday.
I can try to make Tuesday work.
Yeah, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Same time as this. Guys, my name's Liam. This is Reece. This is Mark. We are the Hustle Brothers. Thank you for coming. And until Tuesday, guys, we'll see you then.
See you guys.
See you Tuesday.